Hello and welcome to World Talks here on TVP World. I'm your host Benjamin Lee, and please join me and my guests on this next interview. U.S. President Donald Trump says a deal with Iran is close, yet Tehran continues to signal that major issues remain unresolved. As diplomatic optimism collides with military tensions, questions are growing about whether the region is moving towards a breakthrough or simply another pause before escalation. Joining us today on TVP World to examine the risk, realities, and strategic calculations behind the headlines is Jon Sweet, co-founder of Interrupt 360, a former military intelligence professional whose analysts focus on geopolitical risks as well as national security. Hello, sir, and welcome to TVP World.
Hey, good evening, Benjamin. Thanks for having me back on the show.
Looking at the situation in the Middle East right now, President Trump says a deal is close, but Iran is saying that key issues are yet to be resolved. Now, what does that disconnect tell us about the state of negotiations?
Well, that's a great question, right? Look, it's kind of like the weather here in Puerto Rico. If you just wait 15 minutes, it will change, right? And I believe Iran's position is, it's changed throughout the day, and Trump is just trying to make sense of it. Look, Iran continues to insist that they're not going to give up their nuclear enrichment. They don't want to give up control of the Strait of Hormuz. And now, if you look at the 14-point proposal that they published this morning, they're asking for reparations of $300 billion. They're asking for funds to be unfrozen. They're asking for the UN to, if you will, oversee or overwatch negotiations concerning nuclear power. So it's always something. Just when the president believes he has a deal, and if you listen to CNN, he said that 38 times, and yesterday was the 39th. He still doesn't have a deal, though he insists that we're getting close.
All right, so do you think eventually something has to be negotiated, or are we looking at a Groundhog Day situation until someone finally says, okay, let's continue on with the kinetic action?
Right, so something's going to eventually become negotiated. Now, how we get there is a different story. Look, the president, again, 2 nights ago threatened a third evening of bombings, and he also threatened to take Kharg Island. That generated today's response, in which he elected to begin negotiations again. He said he's going to continue bombing until he gets the peace deal that he wants. And right now, it doesn't look as though the peace deal, even though he says it's 85% complete, and he believes that Khamenei has supported the deal, still hasn't been done. Unfortunately, I think Iran is going to take a punch in the face, I guess, for Iran, another punch in the face to get them to come to the table. Right now, the IRGC is holding up the show.
All right. Is there any strategic calculus behind these decisions on the Iranian side, like you mentioned? Well, they do seem like they need to be decked in the face a few times until they're able to come to the negotiation table. But is there a reason behind this stalling?
Well, you could say that there's multiple reasons. One of the reasons, obviously, is Iran believes they have time. Iran believes that the president is being influenced by negative polling back in the United States. They believe that the War Powers Resolution is going to force his hand, and they also believe that midterm elections could force his hand. So in their interest, they believe they just drag this out, that eventually the president's going to make concessions to them. And interesting enough, that 14-point plan they laid out today is nowhere near, if you will, what the president was proclaiming just 12 hours prior. They're continue to make demands, and I think they're going to continue to make demands and drag this out. Look, they now have Qataris intervening for them or mediating for them, in addition to the Pakistanis. So they're building, if you will, negotiation teams to try to influence the United States. But I think their intent is to drag this out as long as they can to put additional pressure on the president. And I don't think the president is driven by that pressure, though.
Can you help us unpack that a little bit? Do you think that's going to be effective at all, seeing that he is facing a little bit of domestic pressure and polling numbers, and like the midterm is coming? Is that going to actually influence him anyhow, or are we seeing any sort of compromise?
Yeah, I think a lot of people put a great deal of emphasis on polls, okay? And I don't believe the president leads on polls. I don't think he he gives that much attention. He's conscious of it, don't get me wrong. And what more importantly, though, I think he's probably more concerned about the cost of doing business, okay? The price of oil as we enter into the summer months. What type of effect that's having on the U.S. economy. Inflation now is at 6.5%, which, if I'm not mistaken, is the highest level since 2022. So it's a negative trend. But again, I don't know if the president manages or leads by polls. He manages and leads by what he thinks is best. And what he thinks is best right now is that Iran doesn't have access to nuclear weapons, and that means enriched uranium, and that the Strait of Hormuz reopens. So right now, from our perspective, Mark Toth and I, it looks like he's chasing a deal when he should be trying to win the war.
Right, speaking of the Strait of Hormuz, how much leverage does Iran still retain throughout the ability to threaten shipping and energy flows through the strait?
So they have an asymmetric capability clearly with their speedboats and the possibility of employing mines in the area. But if you listen to what CENTCOM told us 2 days ago, they're escorting ships through the strait. The president has said that some of those ships are oil ships and that oil is getting out. So is there influence? Yes. Is there capability asymmetrically with drones and speedboats? Yes. But what we haven't seen recently are any attacks on ships that are going through the area. So clearly the Navy is doing their job.
Do you think the United States will eventually narrow their focus on Iran's nuclear program rather than other stuff like missiles, drones, or some of the proxy groups?
Well, they're going to have to, because quite frankly, Israel is not going to sit around and watch Iran continue to fund Hezbollah, Hamas, the Shia groups in Iraq, or the Houthi rebels. It has to be much more than nuclear. And oh, by the way, I'm not convinced that you can leave the IRGC in power. If we're experiencing this right now with the IRGC in power, what do you think the IRGC is going to be like when the U.S. eventually leaves the region? They're already threatened United Arab Emirates with additional strikes. They're threatening Kuwait. They're firing at Kuwait. So no, leaving the IRGC in power only creates more problems in the foreseeable future. It just creates instability. And that one thing that we keep talking about, forever wars, it creates that condition.
All right, so do you think going forward, the most likely scenario is actually things turning kinetic again, and eventually they will have to, remove the IRGC from power?
Well, at the end of the day, I believe that is the most likely course of action. Look, the president's pursuing and continues to pursue a peace deal. He wants this peace deal, but you can't want it more than your adversary. So that right there is a problem. And again, to truly solve the problem, if you were to remove the IRGC from the equation and open up the Straits of Hormuz, you are going to solve most of the problems that Iran presents in the Middle East.
And what do you think is the trigger right now that could rapidly push the region from having this various round of peace talks back to a confrontational state?
Yeah, I think what it's going to take, again, and the president did say this a couple of days ago, it's going to take an attack on an American base or on an American ship in which American soldiers are killed. He has said that, but we also have to recognize that those have already occurred within the past week. Now, American soldiers weren't killed, but American soldiers were wounded. Purple Hearts were issued. So the threat to U.S. forces in the region is what's going to cause that. Now, the president is becoming increasingly frustrated with the Iranian regime and whoever he believes he's negotiating with, because the team that's negotiating behind closed doors certainly isn't the team that's making decisions. And the team that's making decisions is the one that's causing friction. And right now, I believe that's Brigadier General Ahmed Fahidi.
All right. Can you tell us a little bit about that? What do you think is being discussed behind closed doors? Of course, it is behind closed doors, but what are some of the speculations that's actually going on?
Yeah. So I believe behind closed doors, whoever they are negotiating with, these leaders, with senior leaders within Iran, I believe they want peace. They want to have a settlement. If you believe the president yesterday, while he was having an interview with Fox News correspondent Trey Yinks, he was getting phone calls from Iran from senior leaders begging him to stop bombing. And I'm sure they were. But it wasn't the IRGC that was begging him to stop bombing. It wasn't the IRGC that wants to come to the table to negotiate. From my perspective, unless he is speaking directly to Vahidi or Khomeini, whether or not Khomeini is actually alive or not, he's wasting his time. I do believe that some Iranians want this, but they don't have the authorities to make those decisions. So every time an agreement is thought to have been made, they undermined it. Within minutes, if you will, the president make an announcement of being a success.
Right. So a lot of this issue is also stemming from the internal coordinating issue within Iran, I believe. Is that the case? Are they having issues
Absolutely.
internally?
I believe there is whether it's intentional or whether it's by design or whether it's unintentional, there is clearly a difference between what's said behind closed doors and what's said by the IRGC. Now, just look at the statements that are coming out of Iranian media. It's the exact opposite of what the president's saying. I mean, they continue to threaten the United States. They continue to threaten our allies in the region, right? And then they continue to fire drones at shipping. I think 2 ships today were fired at. So it's provocation. It's continued provocation, but it's also, from my understanding of the region, it's a show of strength. It's a show of defiance. Every time any movement is made forward, they take it back. 1 step up, 2 steps back, as the song goes. And that's what's going on right now.
Right. And of course, that is leading to a lot of chaos indeed. Now, before I let you go, here's a curveball. If you could ask the Iranian leadership one question and be guaranteed complete, honest answer, what would it be?
So when we talk about the Iranian leadership, it has to be the IRGC. And you have to ask the IRGC, will you make concessions? Okay, make concessions to, 1, give up your nuclear power, your request for nuclear power, and will you seriously stop funding the proxies within the region? Okay, I believe that those 2 things can be made and they can come out and validate that, then you have a chance. But the problem is they can say it all day, and they have said it all day. It's what they do. What's the enforcement mechanism? How do you validate that happens? I'll tell you, if it doesn't happen, Israel's going to get right back into the fight. Okay, so the United States can make a deal with Iran, but if they leave Israel out, and that's one of the most important, those 2 things I just said, nuclear power and support the proxies, are the 2 national security interests right now that Israel cares most about. The United States is most concerned about nuclear power and opening up the Straits of Hormuz. They have to find a way to do that. And the IRGC is the solution. It's not the elected officials within Iran. It's the IRGC. They are the decision makers. The rest of them are just talking heads.
All right. We'll have to see how that turns out. But in the meantime, thank you so much for your input and insight. Really appreciate it. And thanks for being with us on TVP World.
All right, Benjamin. Thank you. Good night.
Cheers. And thank you for tuning into this edition of World Talks. But for more news, update, and commentary, please stay tuned to TVP World.